Assumptions are not answers. Assumptions are assumptions. And you cannot live, shouldn't live your life based on an assumption. We have to question every assumption that we have. Many of us have built institutions, we have built communities and societies on assumptions that we had that we didn't stop to critically question. And this causes an imbalance, it causes instability, it causes crisis eventually, it causes inner conflicts. And this is the basis of where we find ourselves in the world today. If we, I remember back in 2017, that was when the deluge of fake news started. And fake news is basically an assumption. People assume something to be actually events happening in real time, whereas almost nothing or something only remotely related is what is actually happening. So many things, and since then, it has become almost normalized. And that's one of the things that actually get me angry. When you mention the word normalization, normalized, we've normalized so many things. We've normalized taking assumption for granted, even when we know it's actually an assumption, and we believe them and we work with them and we actually raise people around those things. And we form a force around it. So that even when people are calling you to, oh, let's go make a change, let's go change something, let's make a revolution, let's, correct this and that, you have to be sure what is it really all about. So, like, you have to question the assumption. Don't assume that you know what's going on. I don't have to tell you that assumptions by themselves are very dangerous. Assumptions are dangerous. Like, you have an assumption about someone, whether good or bad, it can go, both ways for you. It can go south more than you expect. If you have a particular color, there's an assumption about you. If you have a particular, say, age, there's an assumption about you. If there are things you're going to wear, or you're going to put on, and there's going to be an assumption about you, it's going to help everyone if we can question our assumptions. If we could just look beyond their assumptions about themselves and about other people and about many things in the world today. A lot of our values are built and based on assumptions. We have assumed things to be correct that are not. We have assumed things to be the truth that are actually falsehood. And it's actually that assumption has formed the basis, the direction of our lives. So that is the fundamental problem we have in our society today. So it's time to call for critical thinking, but not in the ones you've read about in the academics, in academic textbooks or libraries. It's about practical thinking, thinking more practically about things, and bringing them into general, human life. Like, you question, why do I reason this way? Why do I think this way? Why do I think? Why do I even do what I do? Many times we don't even know why we are doing what we are doing, honestly, and it's very, very, let me say, embarrassing to realize that sometimes. Um, um, as time goes on, I'll share on this, channel how many experiments have been conducted to prove to the fact that many of us don't even know what we are doing sometimes. In psychology, they call it priming, even the word programming. Like you could prime a human to do something that it would never do, and it will actually do it, and only maybe later realize, and maybe never even later realize, because those things were actually done in the context of an experiment. So the question is to ask yourself, why do you believe the things you believe? Why do you think it the way you do? Why do you do the things you do the way you do them? And it's to question that perhaps it's based on an assumption. Assumption themselves are not the problem. Assumption on its own is not a problem. The problem is how you realize that it's an assumption and then moving on to validate your assumptions. And sometimes you may not even have enough data. Most of us don't. We don't have enough data to move beyond our assumptions. Sometimes you just have to work with an assumption, a basic assumption. Okay, like for instance, you see someone approaching you, of course, with maybe a gun or a knife. Definitely, there's an assumption to it. But of course, the person may just, maybe they are on an hunting spree, or they just finished, using a knife in the kitchen or something. And a lot of, let's say police detectives, or you can watch a lot of detective stories and you can get more of what I'm actually saying, or read detective novels and they'll tell you more, But the point is that those uh, should reveal to us, and psychology textbooks, they all reveal to us that we assume more than we think we do. We often are so sure of ourselves when of what we are doing. We know we assume we assume we know for certain exactly what we are doing, and it's very, very like, yeah, I can say it's almost humiliating or embarrassing or frustratingly embarrassing to hear or to see that or observe that in people as a trend and as a pattern. For instance, we live in a we you might actually think we are living in like you might think you are living on a continent, or maybe yours is even smaller, your worldview is smaller, you're just living in your community. But the point is you are living in a much bigger universe. You're actually living in a universe. Um you are not just living in your country, you are living in a continent of that is just one of several continents, and all that continent is on a rocky ball, well, that is called a planet. Planet Earth. You're living on planet Earth, and planet Earth is just one of at least 7 planets. And in that 7 planets, we have a solar system, which is again one of at least 400 billion solar systems, other solar systems. So at least I mean, so far, astronomers have observed 400 billion stars, in our galaxy. So you are living in a galaxy that is one again of trillions of other galaxies. So then how can you be so sure of anything? So the problem is uncertainty. When you're living in a world that is infinitely vast and infinitely large like that, you begin to wonder to yourself, like, how can you be so certain? And even those who know that data, most of us don't even care about it, but some of us do. And if you do care about that data, you still have a problem dealing with uncertainty. Like, because you know why we have a problem with our brain wants certainty. And why does our brain want certainty? Our brain wants certainty because didn't want security. Our brain was wired primarily for survival. So, in order to survive, you have to be certain. You have to know exactly what you are doing. You have to be so sure that a saber-toothed tiger is actually lurking in the bush or not, and it's few seconds that determines whether you live or die. So you have to be certain, and your brain was actually wired to survive, and it was something around. It's not just few years, not just decades, it's not just centuries. Something that happened consistently for millennia. So evolution just naturally took care of that problem. So the brain was designed for survival and adaptation, and that is why we prefer to be certain, even though we don't have the facts, even though we don't have the information, even though we don't have anything, but we prefer to be certain. But then, the nature is dynamic. Nature can be very, very dynamic. It just keeps evolving and things keep getting better and stronger, and it refines itself. And how it does that is that it can strip off waste. It can strip off what it deems unnecessary for the next phase of evolution. And I believe that humanity, we are entering a new phase. Especially beginning from 2027, we're going to be entering a new phase of humanity. Like physically, we're going to be seeing much, much more drastic changes. Like people are evolving, and the point is, one of the ways we can actually help ourselves to fast track this evolution is to start questioning ourselves, to build a culture. Culture can actually help us to fast track our evolution. Culture, what is culture? Culture is basically ideologies, our beliefs, patterns, behavioral patterns, So how we behave in our tribe, in our community, in our ethnic, society and groups. So the point is to then find, a question that can help us. The point is questions themselves are very, very hard. Actually, I believe questions are harder than answers. Most of us think, because of the way we're raised in schools, and as we grow up, working in professional workplaces, everywhere you are confronted with a question that you're expected to provide an answer. And it made us to believe that maybe the answers are actually, the tougher ones. But as you grow, you realize that the question is actually the problem. Sometimes we're not asking the right questions, or we are not asking questions enough. And critical thinking is about asking questions. It's several layers deep, going the five whys. We talked about the five whys, how you ask, why is this happening? There's an answer. It's a Socratic rule. I think that's a Socratic rule of questioning. Like Socrates, the philosopher Socrates used that a lot. The way he taught his students wasn't trying to get them to, he just tell them something. He doesn't tell them anything. He just approaches the students and he starts asking them, why does this happen? And somebody is going to say, of course, this is why it happens. And he say, okay, why does that cause happen? And then it goes deeper and deeper till people start realizing things that they couldn't realize before on their own without that line of questioning. So it helps you to interrogate yourself, to interrogate how you think, how you just like the questions are not deep enough. And sometimes that's the point. Sometimes we do ask questions, but it's not deep enough. So, like, understanding, like, the way I started, this presentation was to say, okay, you live in a community. But if you go deeper, you realize you live in a country. When you talk about country, that's the geographical boundaries set by, let me say, the charters of the map or the atlas. So when you go deeper, you realize you're not just living in a community, you're not just living in a country, you're also living on a continent. You ask yourself further, you realize that that continent is just one of 7 continents. And then you go deeper, you realize that that continent, that those seven continents you're living on, is seven continents on a single planet. And then that planet is a solar system. You go deeper, you realize that okay, the solar system is just one of 400 billion star systems. Okay, those are the numbers that we have. I mean, they gave us. So, but with some degree of, well, let me say, errors. The science community doesn't talk about science. I like them for that. They talk about errors. Like, talk to you about degree of errors. Like, that is satisfactory. So, and I wish we all did that. We realize that, okay, whatever you're saying or doing at any point in time comes with a degree of error. And unless we underestimate